Not fully, but covered for the exam. Just
Covered for the exam. Yeah, that's enough. Only that should be enough. So, 1 second. There's some problem with my cursor here. Now zoom it. I do not need to zoom it for you, na? It is visible.
yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. Right. So, why I'm asking this to you is ki if you haven't covered the research part of Unit 1, then I'm afraid that you won't be able to understand this unit in that kind of, understanding. But it's like even if you listen to it right now and then do the research portion of paper 1 after that, even then you will be able to grasp the concept of things, right? That's the hope. So anyways, this is not that long of a unit. We can finish it in 3 to 4 days. It is just the conceptual part that is important. One or two, not one or two, at least 3 to 4 methodologies of doing research, all of that. So let us just read this first, okay? Feminist research is about overcoming the limitations of traditional conventional research. By this point, matlab, you would be aware that feminism is trying to basically eliminate a lot of things that have already happened. Patriarchy has already happened. Right? Feminism is about eliminating that and creating a more gender equal society. Right? Whatever patriarchy has created, whatever institutions it has created, whatever society, the kind of society, kind of people, kind of ideologies, kind of philosophies, kind of psychologies it has created, all of that is also important, right? Because patriarchy as an institution has been there for the longest time, right? It has shaped our very existence, not just ours, but everyone who has lived in this world, right? At least for the last 3,000 years, right? So obviously, then patriarchy has a lot of influence on a lot of things. The way research has been done in social sciences has also been shaped by patriarchy. Okay, so which is why feminist research also gains importance because it tries to eliminate that kind of patriarchal ideology, patriarchal mindsets which have shaped research. And how research gets shaped is how basically our academics, our dialectics, our narratives of things are going to get shaped. So which is why feminist research would say कि elimination of the inherent biases and prejudices in conventional research is important. Now, what are those prejudices? We are going to discuss that. Okay, so overcoming the limitation of traditional conventional research and replacing it by concepts of feminist research, right? What are the limitations of conventional research? Conventional research tended to be positivist, that is objective, distanced from the object of study, right? Now let us read these also. It was also the concept of pure hygienics and propagated detached spectator, right? In contrast, feminist research emphasizes that all knowledge is limited and not objective. It is based on subjective role of researcher, her bias, location, experience, etc. Right? Now, tell me one thing. Can we say that there is, this is just as a starting example, can we say that there is something which is right in the world and there is something which is wrong in the world? Right? This is often said in Hindi कि मतलब कुछ भी सही या गलत नहीं होता है. The truth lies somewhere in between. The truth is in that gray portion. What we mean by this is कि हो सकता है from my perspective something is right, but from someone else's perspective, from where that person is seeing that thing, from where that person is located in contrast to where I am located, for that person the same thing might be wrong, right? And this is what happens in normal day-to-day life, that most of us cannot agree on even the basic things, right? Because for me one ideology is important, for someone else some other thing is important, right? So what we are trying to say is that there is no one truth that can define the world that we live in. Okay, that traditionally, let's say, 1 second. So if I say that in patriarchy, men basically suppress women. Okay, that for me can be right, but let's say if for some other woman who has not sort of faced patriarchy that much, okay, to some extent everyone has, but it is about the extent of things. Who has not patriarchy that much, she might disagree on this a little bit, and she will also disagree then on the methods needed to eliminate patriarchy, right? Now, first of all, let us try to understand ki what is positivist, what is objective, and what is subjective, and then you'll come back to what I have just said right now. Okay. If I say, that there is a apple on this table, okay, there is this fruit that I can see, and worldwide, at least in English, it is known as an apple only. This is an objective truth. That is something that remains the same throughout. Okay, it does not change, right? If say my mother is sitting over here or my brother sits over here, they will also see that apple, although from different location, but at least the object will remain the same. So at least there is one thing that we can agree on, that it is an apple, right? There is no disagreement there. So this is what is called as an objective thing, the objective truth, that at least in to some extent we are agreeing on something, and it remains the same for everyone. No matter if I am sitting here in India, I am seeing that someone in Canada has an apple, will also see that apple. If I take that apple to, let's say, Japan, there also people in English will call it an apple only, right? And everyone can agree ki this is a fruit and it has some nutrition in it, and all of us will be healthier if we eat it, right? This is an objective truth. But now let's say, okay, so this is something which is called as objective, and objective basically means positivist. So the conventional research tended to be objective and positivist. That is, conventional research was trying to arrive at the objective truth of this world that we live in. They were trying to understand the world in a way, in simple way, basically. Okay, let's say if I can explain this world in one page, they were trying to arrive at that because they were thinking that there is some objective truth into this world that we can explain, and if all of us know that, all of us will be better off. Okay. And so this kind of basically psychology also reflected then in the kind of research that these kinds of researchers did, right? So let's say if that kind of conventional researcher went to do survey on the field and asked certain questions from someone. Okay, let's say ki what is your age, and have you ever faced sexual abuse in your life? Okay, as a woman, have you faced sexual abuse in your life? So answer can be yes or no, right? Let's say ki, who was the person who did that sort of thing against you? Was it a relative? Was it a stranger? Okay, was it someone you had never seen before? That is same stranger only, right? And so with this kind of questionnaire, that researcher thought that reality of sexual abuse, let's say, can be derived from these questions. I have, categorized women into different ages. I have asked them if they have faced sexual abuse. I have asked them which person did so and so. And I have arrived at certain numbers. On the basis of these statistics, I can say that so and so women, जो है, they have faced sexual abuse in society. And if I come at this kind of law, then that law will help me to eliminate, to punish these kinds of sexual abuses and prevent safety, prevent sexual abuse on women, and therefore provide for their safety, right? But let's say now a feminist researcher comes into the scene and she says that the kind of questions you are asking are very simplistic. Okay, how? Because first of all, how do you define sexual abuse, right? Let's say for that kind of researcher, sexual abuse was you know touch of a thing, touch of someone, right? Sexual abuse was basically physically harassing you. A feminist researcher would say कि for me sexual research can be sexual abuse can be psychological too, right? Like let's say from my childhood itself, I was taught to be ashamed of my sexuality. Okay, and that contributed to me not being very confident about my sexuality, and that also has basically mentally harassed my sexuality. So that can also be categorized as sexual abuse. So basically, first disagreement between that conventional research and a feminist researcher has is there on the basis of definition itself, right? Now let's say ki, in that questionnaire, if that was asked ki if in that questionnaire, let's say ki there was that stereotypification that only women get sexually abused, or women are the weaker sex, that is why they get sexually abused. A feminist researcher would say that sexual abuse can not be limited to gender only. There can be men too who can be sexually abused. There can be people from, let's say, LGBTQ community who can be sexually abused, right? And so within all of these disagreements, a feminist researcher would say that the reality of sexual abuse is a very complex one. Okay, first of all, if first of all, you cannot arrive at any kind of statistics which can explain the let's say causes of this problem or the consequences of this problem holistically, because let's say if in India you are able to arrive at certain statistics of sexual abuse, and the definition for sexual abuse in India is so and so, let's say in Canada or in Japan the definition of sexual abuse can be something else, right? Then what will you do? Right, and this kind of research would then not be applicable to such women, and then you cannot be, and then your research will become very very localized, right? That's the point, that your research will become very very localized even though you have assumed that you have used a universal definition of sexual abuse. Okay, so a feminist researcher would say that therefore my arguments represent that there is no one reality of sexual abuse. It can differ from women to women. Let's say Dalit women face more sexual abuse than upper caste women. Poor women are more vulnerable to sexual abuse than, let's say, women of rich sections, right? Uh, let's say ki, teenage girls are also more vulnerable to sexual abuse, right? To as compared to women who are not teenagers, who are above that age group. So what I'm trying to say is that sexual abuse is very much defined by the intersectionality of things, where you are located in terms of caste, class, gender, right? um, your education level, your awareness of things, awareness of law, right? How much can that prevent, let's say if you live in an urban setting or if you live in a rural setting, if you are living in a developed country or if you are living in a developing country or an underdeveloped country, right? So if you can if you can understand what I'm trying to say, is keep the basic point. Now just forget about this example. The basic concept here is that conventional research used to be simplistic, used to be positivist, objective. That is it ki it thought ki there was that one truth that we can arrive at. But feminist research has made the concept more and more complex, because it says that there is no objective truth in this world, everything is subjective, it differs from one person to another. It differs from, again, the country that you live in, the culture that you live in, the gender that you belong to, right? The caste that you belong to, the class that you belong to, the education level that you have, whether you have a paid job or not, all of these things. And so there is no one truth, right? So this is the basic difference between the conventional research and the feminist research. Now we are going to discuss that, as we go on. Right. So, what is a detached spectator? The conventional research used to say that the researcher has to be detached from his or her research. Why? Because you should not basically change the research because of your presence, because of your mere presence, right? Your bias should not be reflected in the research. Otherwise, it will, not be worth it. It will basically color the entire thing into something that you did not imagine it to be. Okay. But feminist researchers would say that the concept of detached spectator for us is not, suitable. In feminist research, when women are researching, for themselves, when women are researching about women for women, right, they can be present in that research. Why? Because as women, their experiences as a woman researcher, her experience also counts. And her experience can help her shape the research in a way that can be more helpful to society. Because then you will be able to relate with your uh, subject, with the person that you are researching upon. Okay, so second point of disagreement, that the conventional research would say that the researcher should be detached from the research, whereas feminist research would say that the researcher has to be present in the research, right? This we have done, that all knowledge is limited. Basically, when feminist research says that, everything is subjective, nothing is objective. Therefore, the knowledge that you are creating as a result of your objective research is limited only, right? And even in feminist research, we cannot arrive at the whole truth of things. That is what we have just explained, which is why whatever knowledge that gets created does not represent the entire truth of things. Everything is then limited, and we are just trying to get as close to the truth as possible. Okay, it is based on subjective role of researcher, her bias, location, experience, etc. So the disagreement between the detached spectator and the present attached spectator, you can say. Okay, so the attached spectator is going to basically, let's say, mold the research by her presence, right? And then we can say, okay, no, let me just frame it in a better way. Right. So, okay. When the feminist research says that all knowledge is limited, what it means is that whatever has been done so far, let's say as a society, globally, we have done a lot of research, right? At least over the last 2 to 300 years, it has been done in an organized way. There are so many international organizations that are, trying to promote it. There are so many countries which rank so high on the research table, right? A lot of investment goes into research. You people are going to be researchers only, so government is going to invest in you by giving you that JRF scholarship, right? So meaning is that we have already done a lot of research, but it till the very present, okay, and more so in the last century and the centuries preceding that, that research was basically done by men. Why? Because men were the ones who were getting all the education, all the finances required for doing a research. You must have heard of, Virginia Woolf when she said, ki, if Shakespeare had a sister in her book, A Room of One's Own, she says, ki, the world does not know of Shakespeare's sister. It only knows of Shakespeare. And she says that if Shakespeare's sister, was also in a, basically symbolic way, if she was also given, let's say, education, if she was also given a room of her own to write poetry, to write drama, then the world would have known her, the world would have known her too, right? Shakespeare's sister. But we do not know of Shakespeare's sister. We only know of Shakespeare. Meaning thereby is that men have dominated research for as much time as we can imagine. Now, if you say the knowledge that we have today, obviously it is a result of all the research that has been done over the preceding centuries. So whatever we have received, as knowledge has been written by men, has been shaped by men, has been given to us by men only, or at least majority of them were men only. So if let's say a man is going to do a certain research, don't you think his bias, his location in the social spectrum of things, right, all of that has shaped the kind of knowledge that we have today, right? No, let's say in anthropology, and this is going to be reflected more in social sciences than it can be reflected in sciences, although it does get reflected in sciences too. How chemistry, physics, all of these things have been shaped. Even the natural sciences, I'm saying, they also have a lot of bias. Okay, but most of this bias can, not most, matlab more than the natural sciences, this bias can be seen in the social sciences. Why? Because there to the basic thing is about society only, right? We are discussing about economy, politics, history, and so social sciences is basically reflected reality only, right? The perceived reality of things, because it can differ from person to person. For me, society can be something very different. For a person living in a rural setting or a woman belonging to a Dalit caste, the social reality can be very different, right? She has been obviously more so at the you know worse end of things, so to say. So her society is very different from my society. I can be very optimistic about this society, but can she be? She has every right to be to be a pessimist about the kind of society that she has, taken birth into. So, coming to the point that social sciences basically, so far, the research, the majority of the research has been done by men, and their bias has been given to us as knowledge. Right? So, feminist research now comes into play, and it says that we are going to undo this bias that has been brought into social sciences and other subjects also, because of, the greater advantages, the greater basically participation that men got into the academics and the knowledge creation, right? So this is what, the feminist research would now mean, that the research is very much shaped by a researcher, by, let's say, the location of that researcher, the experience of that researcher. And so even though, conventional research tried to say ki the researcher has to be a detached spectator, but can you actually, eliminate your role from the research that you are doing? It is not possible for you to completely eliminate that. Your bias of things, the, let's say, in the questions that you have framed, the answers that you were trying to arrive at, the statistics that you deduced from it, the conclusions that you deduced from it, all of that depends upon your perception of things, which is why all of the knowledge that we have received so far has some sort of bias into it. And feminist research wants to undo that kind of bias, and which is why it wants to rewrite, let's say, history. It wants to rewrite politics, it wants to rewrite economics from, researchers who are on the basis of gender. It is a more participative research, right? And then also that the conventional research said that the researcher has to be a detached spectator. Feminist research says ki, since we cannot eliminate the role of the researcher completely, let us, embrace the role of the researcher. Let us, see ki, what is the, experience of the researcher herself. What is that unique thing that she brings into that research, right? Let's say if a Dalit woman is looking at the same thing, and someone else is looking at the same thing, we can see ki what is the difference between these two perspectives, and that can also help us in creating knowledge. That can also help us in seeing ki how society operates. We can basically arrive at the reasons, for not the reasons, at least we can arrive at better social understanding because of the differences in the perception of these two women, right? We can see ki how society is operating, right? So that kind of entire concept, that the role of the researcher then becomes very, very important in feminist research, because feminist research is embracing the subjective role of the researcher. It is embracing her bias. It is embracing whatever social location she comes from, right? Whatever experience she has in her entire life. Okay, so I hope this is clear, or is it too complex?
I have a doubt. Not a doubt, it's basically a confusion. I just want to confirm. So basically, the feminist researchers, they challenged the idea of detached researchers, right? They said that the detached researcher cannot happen because we see biases in the studies,
Hmm.
right? So now what they're trying to say is that instead of taking this idea of detached research and actually giving biased researches,
Hmm.
how we can go about it is by saying that we cannot eliminate the role of researchers,
Hmm.
and let us, like, try to, I don't know, see the biases as much as we can. That is what the feminist
Yeah,
researchers are saying right
yeah,
now, right?
exactly.
All right, thank you.
Any question? Matlab, whatever you have concluded so far is relevant. But any question? Any doubt?
Not other than this, I was just a little confused by
Yeah,
the
yeah, that's okay.
terminology.
That's okay. Yeah. Okay, so also just focus on these terms, because questions are framed out of these terms only. Like, what do we mean by objectivity? What do we mean by a positivist research? What do we mean by pure hygienics? Basically, all of these things are same only. And whatever we have discussed about the conventional research, all of that here. Okay. So, trying to be simplistic about things, not going into the nuanced versions of things, right? And trying to, arrive at one single truth of the world, because that kind of narrative is very much shaped or very much, bought from the natural sciences. Okay. And in the social sciences, that becomes very, very irrelevant. Although in the natural sciences also, it is irrelevant only, but we can say that it was deduced from the kind of research that was done in the natural sciences. Okay. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is ki please remember these terms like detached spectator, knowledge is limited, okay, location, okay, to, be particular about what do we mean by location here, because it can be asked in exam, is basically the researcher where that person is placed in the social spectrum or the economic spectrum even. We have already covered intersectionality. So let's say if this research, which caste does this researcher come from? Okay. Does she belong to the upper caste? Does she belong to the lower caste? Okay. Uh, what is, the class that she comes from? Does she come from a rich background? Does she come from a poor background? Okay. What is even the country that she comes from, because a researcher, let's say from America, is going to be very different from a researcher from India. Their perception of things is going to be very, very different. So all of this, wherever in the social, political, economic, even the political, yes, whatever your ideology is, right? Even though it is very much preferred that you be neutral, but no one is neutral. Everyone has their own biases, right? So all of these things, whatever, ideology you have, whatever social status you come from, whatever your economic status you come from, which country you come from, right? Whether you come from, let's say, the first world or you come from the third world, developed or developing, that kind of difference. So all of that is the location of the researcher, where you are located in the society, economy, politics of things, right? So please remember that. Experience also you have to remember, because feminist research has placed a lot of emphasis on experience as women, because we do gain a lot of experience while going about our day-to-day lives. The experience of patriarchy, the experience of subjugation, the experience of subjugation of sexuality again, right? And then how then that plays into your psyche, your perception of things. So all of that, okay. uh, Whatever you have basically gained on a psychological, on a subconscious level, right? All of that is counted as your experience, and feminist research then pays a lot of emphasis on experience. Please remember that also. Bias, to all of us know, subjective role of the researcher is basically shaped by all of these things only: location, experience, bias, right? Because these can be different from person to person. That is why we are calling it the subjective role of the researcher. Okay. So I hope all of this is very clear to you. This is very important after unit second, for me at least, in 2022. Unit 10 seemed to me the most important unit after unit second. Okay, and that is how I went about doing it. Unit second, unit 1, and then unit 10. And this is how I taught it too now. Okay, so please, be very, very clear about these concepts. Now, another important point, Anne Oakley talked about this research in her book, The Sociology of Housework, which was published in 1974. Okay, where she emphasized on talking with the women about their experiences while incorporating her own researchers' experiences. So, one of the foundational thinkers of feminist research has been Anne Oakley. Okay, why? How in 1974 she publishes this book, The Sociology of Housework, right? Where she says that basically, I have underlined this, that while incorporating their own experiences, researchers have to go about doing their research. Okay, So specifically for women, particularly for women, because your experiences are very relevant to the research that you are doing. Your experiences do count. You do not need to be a detached spectator. Let's see what your, location, what your uniqueness brings into the research. Okay. So then, and this is also important that she emphasized on talking with women about their experiences. Now, I think we have missed one thing, and that is also the difference between the conventional research and the feminist research. Let's say what is an object and what is a subject of study. Okay. Again, going back to that example of apple, apple is a thing basically, right? It cannot talk, it cannot convey its feelings, it cannot tell me about its experiences, it cannot tell me the varying kinds of subjugations it might have faced in its life, right? So apple is basically an object, whereas if I place a woman in front of me, I'm trying to do some research about women, okay, about some experiences of women, that person is now basically a human, right? That person is not apple. That person can talk, can tell me about her experiences, that she might have had a lot of experience, right? Both the good and the bad, and she can bring to me that kind of point that I'm looking from because of her own experience, right? So an apple here is an object basically, whereas that woman is a subject. Okay, this is clear, right? This is very simple. The difference between an object and a subject is that a subject, has a lot of things of its own. Okay, it has experiences of its own, it has feelings of its own, it has a lot of other things of its own. Now, the problem that, where the problem lies basically is that conventional research tended to equate women as objects only. Okay, so let's say if a man was doing a so and so research on some kind of women's issue, okay, that man basically equated his, the women that basically he was researching upon as objects only, right? So it might have just, let's say, he might have asked them to reply in just a yes or no, right? Just as we just did in that example of sexual abuse. Did you face sexual abuse? Yes. Did you face sexual abuse? No, right? So that kind of answer was enough for a researcher who equated women as objects only, right? But let's say if a feminist researcher comes into play, and that can be a man too, right? That person will try to know the reality of things in a more complex fashion. He will try to, come at some kind of holistic understanding of sexual abuse through whatever these women are going to narrate to him about their own experiences of sexual abuse. Now, first of all, this class is ending. Join after 10 minutes, okay?